We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata here. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Wife and I saw the Andrew Garfield Florence Pugh movie. Thought it'd be
Okay.
sadder. Thought it would be sadder because the whole premise is the one has cancer and like, well, what do you think happens? It may or may not happen. But it wasn't that sad. I was also I think the weirdest part of that movie, and this is not a spoiler.
Mm-hmm.
She's like showing him this is how a chef cracks eggs. She's using 3 bowls. She cracks the egg into one bowl, but then when you want to do multiple eggs, you pour that egg into
No,
another bowl with all the eggs, but then also using a bowl to put your cast off eggshells. I was like, no way. No way. Do you not do dishes? Three
no.
bowls for cracking an egg? Get out of here. That threw me out. That threw me for a loop. Otherwise, pretty solid movie.
It's one bowl, two eggs for me. And three eggs is a
It's
lot.
one bowl for 20 eggs for me. I will figure out how to fit 20 eggs in one
Yeah.
bowl if I had to. I am not using 3 bowls for one egg.
No, no, not in this economy. But good to hear that, Mike. Yeah, for the Cincinnati Bengals, I feel like they had some positive news. It was positive when the injury report came out today because I think a lot of people were a little nervous when it comes to Wednesday afternoon and then Thursday. Trey Hendrickson didn't practice, but it was a rest day on Thursday. On Wednesday, they did have the injury of the neck, but on Thursday that was removed. So that is good. It's obviously something that we've heard before that Trey was dealing with. But he should be good to go. We'll get all the final injury report recap going into Saturday. The Cincinnati Bengals will take off Friday afternoon because they're going to go to Los Angeles for a little bit of a longer weekend. T. Higgins limited, which is a positive because it's the first time he's been back at practice since he's had the quad injury. And Orlando Brown Jr. returned to practice today on a limited basis, and the same thing for BJ Hill. So that was a lot, Mike. Major players on the defense and offensive side of the ball, but feels encouraging leading up to game time.
Yeah, I saw a great fantasy football type guy tweet. Don't always love those guys when they tweet, but this one, great analysis. He analyzed T. Higgins running up the hill before every practice and said when he runs up the hill, he plays. And when he walks up the hill, he doesn't play. He ran up the hill. So
He did run up that hill.
I'm thinking he plays. Look, I'm bought in. I'm bought in. This is real analytics for me.
And it was raining today too, so that made me really nervous.
Had to feel good about his footing. Had to feel pretty good about his footing, his ability to get up that hill. So I think he's playing. Um, I don't need any further proof.
Yeah, I think it's a huge deal. And obviously, there's a couple things I want to say about T. Higgins. One, obviously, the soft tissue injuries, they're not ideal. No player wants to deal with that. If T. Higgins could go, he would have played in every single one of those games. He wasn't, one of those players that's like, nah, I've already got the franchise tag. He's playing in a contract year. He's going to get paid in the offseason no matter what. But at the same time, T. Higgins wants to get back out there. And even though this offense, we've watched them over the last few weeks, they played a really bad Ravens defense, and then the Raiders, it was okay. But offensively, they've been okay. But having him back for this game against a tough Chargers defense is going to be absolutely huge for this team.
Yeah, yeah, and the Chargers defense is pretty good. It's interesting. Um, I when I watched it, they remind me a bit of like the Mike McDonald type defenses, in that they play like that soft quarters zone, some three weak buzz. They just play like soft stuff. They want to play top down. They want to make you earn yardage. Their defensive line, they got some butt kickers up there. I mean, they have the butt kicker and Khalil Mack, still an awesome player.
Did not practice all week.
Well, I was excited about that until I searched it, and apparently Khalil Mack tweaked his both groins in Week 9 against Cleveland. And when Daniel Popper of the Athletic asked, or at least somebody asked about it, and he tweeted it, are you expecting to at least give it a go versus Cincy? And he said, hell yeah. So
Oh, great. You know what?
not, you
Take
know
another
what?
week off.
Yeah. He's not taking a week off. Apparently, this is an injury he's been dealing with, and he's very excited to play in this game. So I got excited too. I read that. I was like, oh, their best pass rusher might miss this game. No, they'll have them all. So they got all the butt kickers up front there, and you're going to have to earn it running the ball. And then they also play top down for the most part when it comes to the passing game. I do think early downs, you can get them a little bit sometimes. It's one of
Mhm.
those things where I always watched that Ravens defense and I thought, man, you could go over the top on this team. Like, this is one of those, in theory, it's great to have your safety. He's going to take this guy deep. Do you actually want that? Because I don't. I think of it from like the offensive line perspective. It's like having the tight end on the edge rush. It's like, yeah, he'll just cut down the edge and that'll be safe. Is it? So I'm like, get Jamar Chase on that safety, run him deep, and see if they really actually think that's a good solution, or if they're going to do something else in that situation, or T. Higgins, either guy. But when they get to third and long, it becomes a very different defense. It's very funky. They show a lot of pressure. They don't bring a lot of pressure, but they do bring enough pressure that you have to honor the pressure. So I think that is a very good third and long defense. I would do my best to stay out of third and long against
Mhm.
this team because they drop into everything: fire zones, creepers. They just will play normal coverage, man coverage, zone coverage. It doesn't matter. When they get into third and long, they just kind of do whatever is going to help them. And they do a lot of movement up front in those situations. They're going to slant the defensive line, bring a linebacker looping around them, stunts, twists. I fear for Joe Burrow in the third and long situations. Even if he reads it right, makes the right throw, picks up the first down, probably taking a hit.
Mhm.
And that's not ideal because they're also just good players up front too. We talk about Khalil Mack. I think Joey Bosa is still a pretty good player. Tuli Tuipulotu, that's a pretty good player already as a second-year guy. He's their second in pressures. And then even Puna Ford is having a really good season for them from what I watched. So as a pass rusher, I didn't even know he was a great passer. I knew he was a nose tackle that could hang and be a great run stopper. And I saw him use a swipe move for a sack against the Titans right guard. Titans right guard was handing out highlights left and right in that game. So maybe
Yeah.
it's a competition thing. But hey, the Bengals right guard and left guard have been handing out highlights left and
Yeah.
right in these games too. So I can't say it's just quality of opponent.
Do you think this is the best offense that they've faced so far this season? And I know they've already played the Chiefs, but the Chiefs haven't really done much on offense all season.
Um, I think it is. I think the only two offenses that I looked at as like I want to watch these games because this defense good against a good offense was the Chiefs. I watched that and I thought KC got to some answers. They were able to take some deep shots. They were doing what I was thinking about. Like, hey, you should probably just attack that safety. They did. They used Xavier Worthy, caught a touchdown. And they used Kelsey a lot because when you play quarters two, you only have three underneath defenders. So you'll have a linebacker matched up against your tight end. I think that could mean it's a Gesicki
Yeah.
situation. If you can get Gesicki against one of those linebackers, great. Get him just in space against the linebackers because they don't really have a move guy like Tyler Boyd. That's who I used to think they'd be able to put in that situation. I don't think that anymore. If you put Jamar Chase in the slot, they're not going to actually play quarters with a linebacker on him. Let's be real. They're going
I
to
hope they
change up
do.
that coverage. They'll have a check. Jamar Chase is so good. They have a check for that. But yeah, the other offense was the Cardinals because I think the Cardinals offense is
It's
fun.
pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Kyler, he could be a roller coaster. He was pretty good in that game,
Mhm.
especially when he got rolling. I think James Conner, he's aged like wine, man. I'm so glad he's out of Pittsburgh because I love watching that guy. He is strong. He is like a running back's running back in terms of vision, strength, staying on his feet, reading things out, tempo, setting up his blocks, like so many things that you're just like, man, awesome. Like maybe he doesn't have the top end speed, but I think he's very fun as a runner otherwise. And he's just a ball player too. Saw him force a fumble on an interception to get the ball back for the Cardinals. But anyway,
Yeah.
I just watched that Cardinals offense. I think the offensive line's a little bit underrated. We talked about Froholt, Evan Brown, Paris Johnson's interesting. And it was up and down. It was an up and down performance. I also watched against the Titans, but like I wasn't watching that for a good performance. I was like, did the Titans do anything Bengals like? And they didn't really. They were on a different offense with Levis for the most part, some under center stuff in there. And Levis is not Burrow when it comes to shotgun, so they don't treat him like he's Burrow when they get in shotgun either. But yeah, I think this is probably the best offense they have faced because of how the Chiefs are playing. And the Cardinals, while I think they're fun, I do think the Bengals offense is better.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Here's what and we talked about it kind of going into when T was dealing with that injury. Having Jamar Chase and T Higgins alone is going to be huge for this offense. And obviously, the interior is going to have to play better. And you're going to want the same out of your tackles. Will Orlando Brown Jr. go? I'm feeling like he's leaning towards playing, but obviously, he's still coming off the injury. Won't be fully 100%. But for me personally, I hope the Cincinnati Bengals still use Mike Gesicki like they did in that Oakland game, like they did as a wide receiver number 2 type, but he'll be 3 when you have T Higgins out there, and still use him as a different weapon for Joe Burrow to use against this defense.
Yeah, I the weird thing is like they don't really use Gesicki as Higgins. Like I know like that's how the
Yeah.
production has correlated, but when you think of what Mike Gesicki has done, it hasn't been oh he's on the outside in 2x2 sets and he's dunking on corners and running 15-yard middle of the field route type stuff. Like no, he's been in what you would think you would use Mike Gesicki as either the
Mhm.
number 3 in a trips or out wide in trips in terms of like on the backside of that to try to get an advantageous matchup. And otherwise, he's kind of a big guy. He can run him up the seam sometimes, but he's not doing the T Higgins stuff. So I don't know why they can't get them both productive in one game, but I think this could be the game for it because I assume you're going to treat Jamar Chase like he's Jamar Chase if T Higgins plays. We're assuming a little bit here.
Mhm.
But he ran up the hill. So you treat Jamar Chase like he's Jamar Chase, which means probably a lot of cloud to that side. I still think you need to get him the ball. Joe Burrow had the funny thing about that this week,
Mhm.
but
It
you
was
still
so
need to get
funny.
him. You still need to get him the ball. But I also think like the game plan should probably have a lot to do with Gesicki and Higgins, unless they think they can run the ball in this situation. I don't. You
Mm-mm.
have to try just so Burrow doesn't throw the ball 60 times, hopefully. But I don't think you'll be running the ball very effectively against this defense. Maybe they will, hopefully. But yeah, I think you build the game plan as like put Mike Gesicki in as the number 3 in trips, put T Higgins maybe as a number 1 in trips or on the backside, see how they play those things. Can you get those matchups? Take your shots on early downs. I know I said run the ball a little bit, but you do also want to be able to take these shots on early downs or at least keep the drives flowing on early downs. Throw the ball sometimes on those situations because that's when you're getting the easier coverage to face. You'll know what you're getting more often than not. And really, those are your number 2 and number 3 pass catchers. I know it's finally died down. The cult of Burton has subsided a little bit, maybe after
Mhm.
not great performance, made one good catch. But
Could have really changed the game if he would have had one of those balls though, that
oh
Joe threw.
man, and I felt like the one he could have. The other, no, but the one, I don't know what happened. I just don't think he thought he was getting the ball.
No.
If I'm being honest, I've said maybe he lost it in the lights. That's my nice way of saying like he didn't run full speed. I don't know what happened here. Like there's a
I
bad interpretation too. But Yosivas and Burton, they're like interesting pieces, but Mike Gesicki is a real receiver to me. Like I know he's a tight end, but he's really a receiver. He does all of his work as a receiver. He's not lining up as a true tight end. Sample will do that. They'll use Hudson more as a real tight end than they'll use Gesicki. So Gesicki's basically a big slot receiver. Use him that way. Just that doesn't take away from T. Higgins. T. Higgins does not spend a lot of time in the slot. If you can get Mike Gesicki lined up against linebackers, he should get 8 targets in the game. If you can predict that he's going to line up against, I don't know their linebackers off the top of my head because I know Junior Colson is on IR. So if he's lined up against linebackers, take him down. Just let him work. Let him work in those situations. Also, the race bow air concept where you have a guy sit and then a guy run like a 10, 12-yard in behind it. That worked a lot against this defense with the way they play. And the Bengals love that against Kansas City. They should bring it back this week, at least a little bit. I don't think you can hammer that in terms of like throw it every play, but it's something where you just tie down that underneath defender. The safeties are too deep to make a play on it. Like you should have, I think that's a 2-man game you could run with Gesicki and Higgins, where one of them sits, one of them runs the in, and then you just read the guy. Does he travel down to the sit route or is he back up to cover the basic in route?
Yeah, we'll see what it looks like offensively for the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, just going to be a tough test because it's a legit good defense. Flipping sides to Justin Herbert. Credit to him. He's playing like a top 5 quarterback, and always believed he had that talent. He's good. He's a good quarterback when he's healthy and he's out there. And early on in the season, he was dealing with that ankle injury. Good to see that he's healthy and he's out there. He makes something out of nothing when it comes to some of his weapons that he utilizes. He obviously has an offensive line, which is very helpful and nice against a defensive line that really doesn't have a whole lot of pass rush. And when you think about this matchup overall and the Chargers versus the Bengals defense that has been struggling, what does that look like? Is it another one of those games where it's like Joe's going to have to score 30 plus to win a game?
Yeah. The Chargers offense has gotten better the past, little while. I haven't looked at it too closely. I watched them a little bit. It's interesting. Harbaugh and Roman have, they're bringing back 2008 football, or I guess I should say like 2011, 2012 football when they were with the 49ers, just mashing guys. They've got a fullback in there all the time. I worry a little bit about what the Bengals can do on that, although the run defense has been okay this
Mhm.
year. I do wonder about, like, does it stay that way when you have to take the nickel off of the field and get real base downs? Because they're going to try to force that. They're going to get in the I formation. They run ISO from their power, whatever. They don't, they don't do the Bengals version where it's all shotgun stuff and maybe a little bit of pistol sprinkled in. They're running some real downhill stuff and under center, I formation, etc. Um, and then Herbert is taking calculated shots. And I feel like the reason the offense wasn't as good early on was because he had an adjustment period where he was moving from, being in a situation where he's throwing the ball 50 times a game to being in a situation where he's relying more on his run game. It'll be interesting to see if the Bengals defensive line can do anything against this Chargers offensive line. I saw Trey Hendrickson went from limited to out.
It was a rest day.
Okay.
And he
I
no
didn't
longer
see.
has an injury designation to him.
Oh, thank God. Because I was about to say, yeah,
Oh,
expect to
believe
score
me,
35 to 40 to win this
Mike,
game if Hendrickson misses.
I saw that going into a meeting and that he was out of practice. And then I was like, oh, this game is going to be terrible. And then I get out of practice and they're like, no, it was not injury related. It was a rest day.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because that had me pretty worried. I don't know if you'll need to score 30 plus. Like, I could see this being a 24-27 type game. It doesn't feel like an offense that's as good as the Ravens offense,
Mhm.
or just as put together. They just don't have all the pieces. I mean, I think, like, I like Lad McConkey a lot coming out of the draft. It feels like he's been solid for them this year. You got Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson, but it's like a lot of guys, like, they don't have the weapons that scare me. And the offensive line is pretty good, but I don't think it's elite. And they're missing some interior pieces to take it there. I mean, Johnson, Bozeman, Pipkins, I think is who they're playing at right guard.
Mhm.
Could be Sawyer. It's not a great interior. Now, this is the stoppable force versus the movable object because the Bengals' defensive interior, not very good either. So, no, once again, if there was ever a Rankins game, it's here. Come on. Show us something. The edges will be interesting because last time Hendrickson and Slater faced off, that was a battle that Slater mostly won, but Hendrickson had one of the best pass rushers I saw the entire year to get a strip sack on him. So, like, who really won type of situation where you win 90% of the reps, but when you get beat that bad for that bad of a result, it almost feels like you lost that battle so devastatingly that you lost the war. The other side, Joe Alt, I'd love to see Murphy get some opportunity against him. I think he's good enough that Sam Hubbard is going to produce single digit, pressure rates, if not worse.
Oh, yeah.
So let's let the young guy, let's let him go. Hopefully we see something there. But yeah, I just don't think the pieces on this Chargers offense are like good enough that you have to think of scoring 30 plus in this game.
I hope not. That's getting exhausting. And that just puts so much on Joe. Like, obviously, Joe is playing amazing football right now, and so is Jamar Chase. But you can't expect your offense to do that every single week. And they need to at least go 6-1, at worst 5-2. And all of these games are extremely important. You can't keep doing that to your offense. Let them control the game as much as they can, but the defense has to find a way to close. And obviously, this will be a huge test. It's on the road. Bengals have had more success on the road this year, and they're hopefully it's a game that can really turn things around, because honestly, getting this game and getting 5 wins going into the bye is so good. Going to the Pittsburgh game, you get a win on the road, you get a whole 2 weeks to get healthy, get everybody back, and then you have an AFC North game at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that'll be a huge battle. So for this Cincinnati, for this game, it's just it's the season. And we keep saying that, like, you have to win this game, you have to win this game, and they never win those games that we keep saying that they need to win. But this is
Well, people keep saying that.
yeah.
I've been saying I don't care what happens in the Raiders game. I think they win. I don't care what happens in the Ravens game. I think they lose. This is
You
to
did
me.
say they were going to lose that Ravens game. I was still disappointed.
Yeah. Like I didn't think that was a Ravens. Oh, you lose the Ravens, you lose the rest of
No.
the season. No, you lose the division. Like
Yeah,
that's true.
that's
Like
all
I
true.
don't see them winning the division, but they're not out of the wild card race. This would probably knock them out of the wild card race outside of winning out, and I don't expect that.
Mm-mm.
So even though I think they'll have a distinct quarterback advantage the rest of the way, with the
Yeah.
next best quarterback they face being Russell Wilson, probably. Um, yeah, I just this game is the one that's like you win this game, I will buy back in.
All
If they
right.
lose this game, I'm
I
I'm
said,
pretty sold out. I'm just looking at guys for next year. Just not looking at guys free agents and draft, but looking at the guys on the team, thinking about next year. And I'm watching, still hoping for some wins, but at the end of the day, that will feel pretty bad to be essentially out of it in that situation.
yeah, like I've said before, if Joe wasn't playing the way he was and they were sitting at 4-6, I would just be like, oh, this season's a wash. I don't really have a whole lot of confidence going forward, even if they were to string some wins together, even if they were to beat the Chargers. But just the way he's playing, I know the defense is brutal and it just they cannot finish games. It's absolutely insane. But for some reason, I still have this feeling of believing in this team. And the majority of it is when I look at the AFC playoff picture overall, when I see the teams that are right there in the middle of it with them. I don't know what the Colts are doing. They made the quarterback change again. The Broncos, they're solid on defense, and Bo Nix seems to be getting it together offensively. That's obviously going to be a team that you have a chance to have a tiebreaker against, but you got to get this AFC win. You got to get it. And the Chargers, they still have some brutal games down the stretch too. You know, it could turn around for them and you could really have an advantage in the wild card with the Chargers for a spot. So I think it's a huge game for them. And you hope the defense can do enough against a really good quarterback and Justin Herbert, one of the best that they'll face this season. But Mike, what is going to happen?
So the Chargers' home advantage just isn't the same as a lot of teams. I don't know if the Bengals will even need a silent count in this game because most of the people that go to Chargers games are not Chargers fans. It'll be interesting because the Bengals fans don't really travel.
Oh,
Uh,
they travel pretty well, I think.
do they?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think of them as like a Pittsburgh takeover
No, no,
type of
no, 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 no.
situation. No, those guys are like cockroaches.
Yeah.
They're just unkillable and everywhere. I think they'll travel enough, but like I don't. Raiders fans too. Raiders fans lived right by there too, so that's a big one. But I don't think that like you'll go into that stadium and see so much orange that the Chargers are using a
No.
silent count. It'll almost probably feel like a Super Bowl in that nobody needs one. Like both teams are fine, just do normal cadence. So I do think it's right to probably not give the full like 2.5 points or whatever you're thinking of for a home field advantage. Still have to give some advantage because the Bengals have to travel all the way across the country and play on the road and play in a different time zone. But I don't think you have to give them the advantage of like, and they might have to use a silent count and whatever else. It's interesting. This game, I think you can make cases both ways. Like your case about you think that the Bengals are the best offense they face, and I agree with you. I also think when you bring up the other part I brought up, it's kind of a Mike McDonald-like defense, especially on early downs. Like that doesn't bode well. But then you look on the other side. They run the ball well, and they're going to try to establish the run, or at least they try to establish the run, even if they don't run the ball that well. It's the one thing the Bengals can kind of stop, but it's a competent quarterback. I have been very mixed on this. I think this is a true pick 'em type of situation. I'm going to go 24-23 by picking the Chargers.
Okay. I will flip. Joe Burrow talked about it this week, and he said their defense kind of reminds him of the older Ravens matchups. I wouldn't say this year because they've had tons of possessions, not like, the old defensive coordinator that the Baltimore Ravens used to have where you only had limited possessions. And I think we're going to see that. Yep. I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see that in this matchup versus the Chargers, where you do have to take advantage of the possessions you're getting. You have to establish a run game, something that they've struggled with. Your interior has to play better. it's going to be tough against this defense. It's not the Raiders. And the Raiders defense is fine, but it's not the Raiders defense and it's not the Ravens defense. The Ravens defense is pitiful. I wish they were playing the Ravens defense again, honestly. But this matchup, it's going to be a tough one. I'm not expecting a 30-plus point game. I think, your offense is trying to do so much over the last few weeks for the Cincinnati Bengals team, but I think the Bengals are going to win it. I do. It's prime time. It's prime time, Sunday Night Football. And I think that knocking on wood, they've shown up under the lights. Unfortunately, the Monday Night Football game, their defense couldn't get one stop, but Joe Burrow was there. And I do think that this offense will do enough. Having T. Higgins back is going to be huge. I think you really do need to just utilize T, Jamar, Mike Gesicki, get a run game, and hopefully your interior can hold up against the pass rush. And look, it's going to be a tall task on the defensive side. If you do enough to contain Justin Herbert, then that's huge. That gives me a little bit of confidence going into the next few games and at least going into the bye that this team could do enough in a wild card playoff game. They could do enough. I could believe in this defense. They're not going to have a shutout or anything like that. It's still going to be ugly plays, explosive plays that I'll be annoyed with, that Geno Stone can't just push a guy out of bounds, or what are they even doing when it comes to the defensive line rotation? But I will take the Bengals. I'll go with 24 because that was in my head. 20. And they'll be the under of 47.5.
I just realized, after I said that, I looked down and I was like, oh, I'm just saying what Vegas says. 24-23, right at the over-under, right at the line.
Well, hopefully Joe feels a little revenge to go back to SoFi. The last time they played there, it was the Super Bowl loss. And he's like, you know what? I remember that stadium. I remember. And it's funny, Spencer mentioned Raiders fans. When I was in LA for the Super Bowl, Raiders fans kept telling us, and it was the Rams, obviously, but they were like, beat the Rams. We hate the Rams. I'm sure they feel the same way about the Los Angeles Chargers being in the same division and everything like that. But yeah, they're all around. It's kind of funny. But yeah, hopefully Mike's wrong. And if Mike is wrong, that means that he's back on it for the Cincinnati Bengals season. He believes in them again for at least another week. For 2 weeks, because we'll go to the bye and you don't really have a choice.
I would probably still believe in them even if they lost to the Steelers if they beat the Chargers.
I think you can split with it, not to look too far in advance, but I think
that's exactly what I think is you could lose one more game the rest of the way, and if you split the Steelers, that's not impossible to think about. You have to beat the Broncos, and you have to win your gimme games, the Titans and the Cowboys without Dak. But I think you can afford to lose one game to the Steelers. But if they lost the game after that, then I'd be back out. But right now I'm on the fence. They win, I'm back in. They lose, I'm kind of out. They beat the Steelers after that. I don't know. Maybe they'll kind of drag me back into it. But
Mike will be like, wait a minute. What about those wild card tickets? They might be playing Pittsburgh. They might even be playing in Pittsburgh.
They might be playing in Pittsburgh.
Look, the Cincinnati Bengals, they do have to win. They do have to win. I want to say this because I can still say this because they have a shot as of November 14th at 7:31 p.m. on Thursday evening. The perfect ideal scenario in my brain, the Bengals get in as a wild card. They take out the Baltimore Ravens or they take out the Buffalo Bills in the wild card. They go into the divisional round and they take off the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. That would just be...
I don't think I want to see Kansas City undefeated in the playoffs. I'm hoping for a Bryce Young miracle this week.
I'm just saying, sometimes...
Your dream is Kansas City Chiefs undefeated?
And losing in the divisional round. It would be the perfect ending. It would be perfect. What would they care if they went undefeated in regular season if they lost in the playoffs?
Ask Golden State fans about 73-9. They'll care. Ask Patriots fans. 16.
No, that would just burn them. That would just absolutely destroy them. And I know they have Super Bowl.
They'll still call it the greatest team of all time. And they'll be like, yeah, it got lucky. Got lucky about how that team lost or whatever. Eli magic. LeBron got the ref kicked, Draymond kicked out or whatever. They always come with some excuse about this was actually the greatest team of all time. I don't want to hear it. I want to see them lose at least one game. I don't
Or
want to. I don't
they
want
am
to see
kind of,
it.
yeah, that's probably right because then you'd be playing against the officials too, and I don't want anything to do with that because they would definitely want it to be an
Oh
undefeated.
yeah, imagine Goodell up there. He's calling things in. He's got
Uh-huh.
the B Dubs thing.
Yeah.
Except instead of go to overtime, it's get Kansas City the win. We need to see an undefeated team in the Super Bowl. That's the narrative we need.
Yeah, 100%. But it's either that or you think, can Baltimore beat them 3 times in one season? After Cincinnati has controlled
By
like
a total of 3 points.
that would be insane. So, I mean, believe me, I would be a nervous wreck if they found
Yeah.
a way to get into the wild card. But if I was the other teams, I would be nervous too to play Joe Burrow in the playoffs, who he is very good in January, outside of not having half of his offensive line in the AFC Championship game, well, twice. I don't know. I think that would just be so fun. And if you're an NFL fan, you want Joe Burrow in the playoffs. You want them to find a way to
For sure.
get this back on track and see Joe versus maybe a backup in the Colts. No offense to Bo Nix, but come on.
Yeah, we talked about it last time we were on. I think like if you were a team, you want to face the Broncos, Dolphins, the Colts, whatever. Just the Bengals, I don't think you'd want to face them as a 2 seed. I mean, most of those teams already have scars from the past couple of playoffs, and then two, you don't want to face an elite quarterback. And then I brought it up, like as bad as this defense is, like I do think they'd probably put a good game plan together, up to the players to execute it. But Lou Anarumo is one of the game plan coordinators. I think he's one of the best, and I think that's a reason everybody loved him. But he's also not a season long high end coordinator. That's why he's never coached the top 3 defense in his tenure. But I think it matters more to be a good game plan guy and get your team through the playoffs like that, because we saw the wizardry in 2021, and then 2022 he had a little bit of stuff up his sleeve too. So I would not want to face the Bengals if I was another team. I would much rather face a rookie, a backup quarterback, Tua. Especially if I'm like Kansas City or Buffalo, and like Tua has to go to the cold. Yeah, come on. That,
Well, yeah.
no disrespect to the Dolphins, they just have not shown me that they can play in very cold weather.
Yes, Buffalo fans would be like, "No, thank you." We still remember. We still remember the last. And honestly, it's just such a mismatch when they play the Bengals. So I actually would love to see that again. But hey, they have to win. I'm saying I can say this stuff on November 14th because right now it's a realistic possibility that they
Yeah.
could be out. But if they lose to the Chargers, then it's over. Like, it's unfortunate. The ball didn't bounce their way. Luck is important. Health is important. And I truly didn't believe the whole luck thing, but luck, health, and talent all are important in football. And the Bengals they've had talent on offense, but luck and some of the health issues haven't been on their side. So hopefully they can win on Sunday night. It'd be fun to talk about a winning game going forward for 2 weeks before they face the Pittsburgh Steelers. And make sure you check out Mike's work. We talked about pass rush, Miles Murphy this week. There's a great piece over on Bengals Talk. Follow Mike's breakdown, Bengals_Sands over on Twitter. You can follow me at Lindsay Patterson. We'll be back Monday for a little recap on Bengals Chargers Sunday Night Football. Thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.